Ready to elevate your credit understanding and score? With insider tips and a plan, you can take action to improving your score, which can save thousands in unnecessary finance charges. Let's tackle today's topic with your coach, Credit Christy.
Hey friends, it's Christy, your credit coach. Thank you so much for being with me for another episode. This week, let's talk about paying for problems. I lived this myself. I see it happen all the time. What do you do when you don't have an emergency cash cushion and something goes wrong? Something happens. Let's face it, life is not predictable. We are truly not in control. All we can really do is be best prepared for what life throws at us. So what happens when? What happens when you have to have a deductible in order to make an insurance claim on your health insurance, your auto insurance, your homeowner's insurance? God forbid a hurricane happens, because most people have a 2% deductible of their dwelling coverage on their homeowner's insurance, meaning if your home is insured for $200,000, you have a $4,000 deductible hitting before insurance kicks in. I just read recently that 30% of American households cannot pay cash for a $400 emergency. So what happens when there's a car or a house repair, or there's an injury to your pet or a child? What happens if somebody gets ill in your family and you have to get on an emergency flight or take a trip someplace unplanned and unsaved for? What if you get a speeding ticket? I've seen speeding tickets for $200 to $400 these days. Or heaven forbid, you get injured and you can't work for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And let's say you don't have sick time or vacation time that you can draw from. What happens then? And this is where most people default to credit card usage. And this is where I think the problem starts. So something unexpected happens, and this is where the problems, I believe, really generate from for a lot of households. So there are some of us that just didn't really understand credit, didn't grasp the actual point of it, that it was there for an emergency or just to utilize to pay something in that moment. But the goal is to pay it back before that due date comes. I was not taught that. I did not have an understanding of that. And I remember being in college and having to take out a cash advance because what I needed to pay for, they wouldn't accept a credit card, and I didn't have cash, and I did not have an emergency fund. Gracious, I didn't have $20 to my name. So I take out this cash advance, and I remember the teller at the bank I walked into trying to talk me out of it, seeing if there was any other way that I could utilize or get my hands on cash besides using a cash advance. And I thought in that moment, well, this is available to me, and I have this available in my limit. It's just like using my credit card for a purchase, so why not? I didn't realize, my friends, that a cash advance is a much higher interest rate. When you go to pay back that balance that's on your credit card, the credit card companies typically apply your payment to the lowest interest rate as far as your balance. So if you have purchases over here at 12.99 APR and your cash advance is at 24.99 APR, of course they're applying your payment towards that lower APR because they earn more interest off of that higher APR that's charged to you. It took me what felt like forever to repay that cash advance. So let's say you're doing a fine job managing your bills and you're keeping your credit card balances low or paid off, but then something happens. This is why Dave Ramsey preaches and teaches so hard about an emergency fund. And I'm going to echo what he teaches. Before having some of those wants in your life, I encourage you to save for at least $1,000 emergency fund and put it away. Keep it in a bank account that's actually very difficult to access. Maybe with a bank that doesn't have a brick and mortar place. So if you have to access it, it takes a little bit of work to get to it. It will be available in an emergency, but it really creates like a disruptor because you have to think twice about going through all of the steps to get to your cash. So that will help you frame in your mind, is it really an emergency or am I tapping into it because I have it? And then your next goal is to ultimately get to 2 to 3 months worth of your take-home pay that covers all of your expenses. So if you live off of $3,000 a month, your goal is to get to $6,000 to $9,000 in savings. I know this sounds insane for some people to take in. I was lucky if I could get to $500, but something happens once you get started and it creates a momentum in your life. And it's incredible what happens. So here's our steps for paying for problems. Step 1, get at least $500 into an emergency fund and make sure it's in a separate account from your operating expenses or from your main checking account. Put it in an account that is going to be difficult for you to access. In other words, if it's in the same bank that your checking account is housed, you could easily just pull that money over without giving it a second thought. Make it be a place that you have to go to a whole separate login and maybe wait for that money to get transferred over to your checking account. I know my online savings account can take up to 3 days to move that money over. Most emergencies can either wait 3 days or you can front that money on that credit card but pay it off as soon as that money comes over from your savings and into your checking. We have to and we want to avoid the interest charges coming from that credit card. So think about it. If it's a repair or an insurance deductible, typically you have a few days to pull that money together. But if you just learned a very important person in your life that is on their deathbed and you're buying a ticket to fly to go see them, you're doing it immediately. Obviously, you're going to put that on a credit card if you don't have that money in your emergency savings account. So your first step, step 1, get to $500 in your emergency savings account. Step 2, start with your highest interest on your credit cards, which are usually store credit cards, and pay that baby down to a 0 balance and keep it that way. Take that credit card out of your wallet, store it away in a very safe place that you can't get to right away, and ignore all those mailings or those emails with all these tantalizing offers. Most stores in which we have a credit card too, it's not a need, it's a want. So just for the moment, we're going to put our wants to the side and we're going to double down and make these debts go away. So now that you've paid off your couple $100 store credit card, maybe a couple of those, now you're going to start tackling those larger balances. There's 2 ways to go about it: the avalanche or the snowball. I'll give you a quick definition of what that is. The avalanche means you tackle the largest and make it go away, and it just comes down on all of the rest of the credit cards and debts that you might have. So that's really where you start with the highest interest rate and make that go away. If you think about it this way, the highest interest charges typically mean the least amount of your payment going towards paying down that principal amount or that balance on your charge card. So if you start with the largest one and just put everything you've got to it until that balance is gone, versus the snowball effect, which is what Dave Ramsey teaches. And this is where you start with the very smallest credit card balance that you have, put everything you've got to making it go to 0, and then starting with the next lowest credit card balance. What I like about this strategy is that there's a win in it for you, probably a little bit faster than your highest interest credit card. And then those wins all add up to one another. You start this momentum. You've got this little credit card gone, check. You've got the next little credit card gone, check. And you start building that momentum towards it. You take that payment that you had, say that $25 that was going to that smallest credit card, and you apply it to the next credit card in addition to the monthly payment that you were already making. And then every time you pay off a credit card, you take what you were applying to that credit card payment and add all of those to the next credit card that you're paying off until ultimately you have no credit cards with balances. Once you get to the point where your outstanding credit card balances are manageable, maybe you're down to 1 or 2 credit cards to pay off, the next thing I want you to do is start thinking about what you spend for Christmas and start setting aside the appropriate amount of money where you can pay cash for your Christmas gifts. And not just Christmas. Think about Mother's Day and Father's Day and birthdays and anniversaries. And if you have children, I know you spend a lot of money on their birthday parties to make it this very special, memorable moment. So start writing out what that looks like, what those costs are for gift giving, for celebrations, and for special holidays. And if you spend $1,200 a year between all of those things, I want you to set up another savings account, a separate savings account from your emergency fund, and name it. Name it your gift giving account. That'll help you feel warm and tingly when you're contributing to it every single month. So if you're paying $1,200 a year in gifts, go ahead and set aside $100 a month or $50 out of every paycheck if you get paid every other week, something that's manageable for you. And that way you've got that money there, that cash money to pay for those parties and those gifts without having to pay on credit cards with interest. In an earlier episode where I was explaining APR, I used an example of a $3,000 balance and how if you didn't charge anything more on it and you just paid $100 a month because that's what you could do, approximately $50 of your payment goes towards interest. And it would take years to pay that off. Not to mention you've added a third of what you've borrowed in finance charges to the tune of over $1,100. Why pay more? It's not necessary if you plan. Could you imagine hosting a dinner party at your house and you didn't plan out the meals? You didn't plan for how many people were coming. You didn't get the appropriate ingredients or have the recipes set up. It would really truly be a disaster. And yet that's how we approach our finances. We just kind of let it happen to us. I don't know about you, but I used to check my checking account balance every couple days to see what was left and how many days until payday and what's going to get auto drafted out, and do I even have enough money for gas? Can I stop at the grocery store, or do I have to go and get that $5 pizza and turn it into 4 or 5 different meals to get until payday? I know you don't want to live that way. I didn't want to live that way. Become the boss of your finances, and it starts with having an emergency fund, so that way you're paying cash for your problems. Otherwise, those problems become bigger problems because there's interest added. I know you can get to $500 in your emergency fund. I know you can. You can find a way. You can cut some things out of your life for just a temporary moment. I can't even tell you the empowering feelings that will come with paying off your debt and no longer being a slave to it. I wish when I was in my young 20s, I had somebody telling me what to do when I found myself in a really bad place where I had several maxed out credit cards and a lousy income to repay it. So I hope these words of advice helps you. And I'm going to throw this out there. If you would like some personalized coaching on how to get out from under what you are in, I invite you to send me an email at questions@creditchristie.com because I'd love to help you. And if we haven't already, please connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Credit Christie. And until next time, my friends, stay well.
Subscribe now and share with a friend to stay in the loop for new credit content and insider tips to maximize your credit knowledge. And follow Credit Christie on Instagram.